welcome back to Paul Murray Live. With me, James Morrow, still joined by Linda Scott, James Ashby, and Christian Abraham. I want to talk about a serious story here today. There's a bakery in Surry Hills, Sydney, called Avner's Bakery. They seem to have allegedly been targeted by an anti-Semitic attack, including red triangles, which are a symbol of the military wing of Hamas, painted on the glass, and a note saying, "Be careful." It's horrifying stuff. And something I want to talk to you, Linda, about is one thing that does seem to be missing from the labor agenda is doing something really strong about anti-Semitism, because, frankly, I have been absolutely shocked. I know you have, and a lot of people out there have been, by the horrendous number of anti-Semitic incidents. This is real 1930s Germany stuff here. I don't want to make this a labor liberal thing, but I do want to make this about like a decency thing, and I really do worry sometimes that the Prime Minister does try to both sides this issue and say, oh, well, you know, everybody's kind of hurting on both sides, but it feels like there's a real crisis with this anti-Semitism stuff. You see it around Sydney. I do too. What are your thoughts?
Look, I think it is terrible to see these reports of this attack over the weekend in a Surry Hills bakery, you know, mile patch in the city of Sydney. Awful to see threats left under the door. Awful to see terrible hate speech graffiti. And this is not, unfortunately, as you rightly acknowledge, it's not an isolated incident. Earlier in the year, I moved a motion for the city of Sydney to take a really hard view on this and remove any hate speech graffiti within the hour. And I thought that was a reasonable proposition.
Sure. It'd be great if they could, frankly, remove other graffiti quickly as well.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, the Lord Mayor has outsourced all that, and it takes forever. It's very expensive. But I think if you've got a hate speech message up on a wall or up on a sign, I've had people on my call flutes the election before last putting Nazi propaganda even on my call flutes, right? So it is unfortunate that this hate speech seems to be increasing every electoral cycle, but particularly it's very noticeable right now. And the Lord Mayor Clover Moore at the time voted that down. Yeah. She said that that was too fast, that we should be able to leave that graffiti up for longer than 1 hour. I mean, I just think that's completely unacceptable. It sends a cultural message that we tolerate this kind of hate speech. It is unsafe. It makes people feel unsafe. This is completely the wrong thing to do. Now, it's hard for local governments. We saw, obviously, I mean,
the local governments, they've got to take their cues from what's going on up the chain, right? I mean, like James Ashby, I want to just bring you in on this here. This stuff here, this anti-Semitism, I know that I have been shocked since October 7th by the amount of vicious anti-Semitism that seems to have just been lurking right under the surface. And it feels to me like Anthony Albanese has been really slow off the mark. I remember days after the attacks and the news came out, you know, Rishi Sunak was out in London reassuring the Jewish community. Other leaders were doing the same thing. And Anthony Albanese almost had to be dragged to a shul in Melbourne to say, you know, a few words to reassure everybody. It's like this is this reactiveness, and then into the vacuum, you know, all of this hate can kind of exist. What are your thoughts, James Ashby?
Well, James, it has been very disappointing to see the Prime Minister so laxed on coming out and being strong on this particular subject. I'd love to see more strength from him. I would certainly love to see more strength from Penny Wong on this subject as well, and other frontbenchers. But there has been this really relaxed mood from this government to say anything. And the other thing we've got to realise, it's not just businesses that have been painted with this upside-down red triangle. Our very own federal parliament was under attack with big banners. This giant, big, upside-down triangle was painted across the very front of our Parliament House in Canberra. And, you know, the only people not to condemn that action were the Greens. Again, why is it that the Greens are being let off so lightly here? Why is it that the Greens think that this is tolerable behaviour, not just federally, but on a state basis as well. Someone needs to call this behaviour out. If it's not good enough to put swastikas up, it's not good enough to put Hamas symbols up either.
Bingo, absolutely. Kristen, what's wrong? I'll bring you in here real quick. What do you think, though? Because, of course, as a libertarian, you'd be all for free speech. How does the government maintain free speech, but then also you crack down on all this hate speech?
You're right, the libertarians have a strong principle of free speech, but they also have a do no harm principle. And one of the biggest pillars of libertarianism is that every individual is equal. So aside from race or religion, we are all equal and should be treated in society as such. So I think what has happened with this bakery is abhorrent, and it makes me wonder what Australia has come to. At different times, we need different kinds of politicians, and right now we need a leader to unite the country and come out really strongly about these topics, but they're not, and I have to disagree slightly with James. He said they're taking a relaxed approach. I don't think they're taking a relaxed approach. I think they're taking a fence-sitter approach, and that is a very conscious decision.
Well said.
Because they care more about
very relaxed.
Yeah, well, it's a relaxed fence-sitter approach, maybe. We could say that. But, hey, listen, let's move on here, though. I want to move on from this here because we do have some more American politics to cover here. And Democrat vice presidential nominee Tim Walz had himself a little interesting weekend. Went out on a bit of a pheasant shoot. He wanted to do a big photo shoot of him hunting to show he's just an average guy, the voice of the Midwest, out there with his shotgun and his hunting gear, which was clearly just bought off the shop at Kmart. Let's have a little look.
It never fits quite right. Never fits quite right. Just not quite right. How do you give it back?
Governor, what kind of gun is it?
This is a Beretta A400. I bought it when I was shooting a lot of trap because it has a kind of their patented thing, a kickoff. So when you get old, it doesn't hurt your shoulder as much.
Now, remember, this is a guy who bragged about his military experience in the U.S. National Guard. CBS News reports in the 3-hour session with the media, Tim Walz did not fire a shot. James Ashby, let me start with you on this one here. I mean, the whole sort of Tim Walz thing and the way that the Democrats are bleeding away support from male voters, and including a lot of big unions and working-class unions, too. But, like, this sort of thing just feels very humiliating. Why do some politicians feel the need to do these kind of stunts? Is it a sign that this election is running away from them? James Ashby.
Well, they say never work with kids or animals in politics, and certainly in front of cameras. But in this case, don't buy yourself a new Beretta off the shelf and think it's going to work smoothly, because that's precisely what's happened here. He's bought a new gun, as you say. He's bought the new gear off the shelf to try and look the part, but it hasn't gone to plan. And these are the mishaps that you try and avoid in politics, because they can come back and bite you on the backside. Any experienced shooter would know very well that a brand new gun's quite tight, and they do take a bit of time to loosen up. But yeah, he's been caught out. But they happen to do it here in Australia too.
Well,
I do note though that the opposition here in the Queensland state election isn't doing anything that isn't very well scripted, or the media monitors are making sure none of those mishaps happen here in this Queensland election.
Yeah, well, I mean, Linda, you're an experienced political operator. When you see something like this sort of, display of kind of faux manliness with the shotgun and everything like that, does this speak to bad advance work by the Walz campaign? Because it seems like every one of these things they step on a rake with it.
Look, I mean, I think most Australians would find images like that of a candidate in a political election, running around with a gun pretty odd, to be honest.
Sure.
So, it's rather unusual generally for Australians. I've got to say that out loud.
Just to sort of
but yeah, I mean, look, of course, images in political campaigns are so tightly controlled. I mean, James will shout me down, but Stephen Miles has been out announcing free school lunches this week for all Queensland children if he wins re-election as the Queensland Premier. The images associated with that were remarkable. The Premier children, giving them free lunches, what a great policy to bring down cost of living. So these kinds of things are very scripted, they're very rehearsed, they're very controlled, and that's important in the context of an election campaign.
Look, I just can't remember the last day. It's been quite a number of days since the Harris-Walz campaign have had what we would call a good day. But look, we're going to go to a break in a moment, but before we go, I really wanted to talk about this story. Great story in the City Morning Herald. I know, right? But there is a theme park, apparently, where kids can be construction workers. There's a place called Thunderbird Park, and I love this. This sounds like so much fun. They have real earth-moving machinery for kids to get in, dig holes, stack car tires, use wrecking balls, all, of course, safely. Linda Scott.
I just want to say that I love this, right? I mean, I've been involved in lots and lots of park designs in local government, and you see those little tiny beautiful diggers with a bit of tambuck, but these are like full-on massive diggers where children as old as kind of 2 and 3 can go in there and smash things up and dig up big holes in the ground. I love it. Best playground. It sounds so much fun. Like, I'm all for this kind of tourism. I just think it's awesome. And look, to be generous at, you know, as we come to the break, just like James said, we should be out there when cost of living is rough. Get out, support your small businesses, you know, support
Bingo.
your local tourism
Bingo.
operators. Get out to these kinds of things wherever is close to your home. They're a great opportunity. But this one just looks so much fun in the Blue Mountains of Sydney.
It looks like so much fun. I want to go out there and play on some of that stuff too. Anyway, listen, you're right to support independent, support local, and thank you, Linda Scott, as always, James Ashby, as always, and Christian Abraham, as always. Now, do not go anywhere, because Jacinta Price, after the break on this historic 1-year anniversary tomorrow of the referendum, you're not going to want to miss what she has to say. Stick with us.